All right. Well, hey, welcome to Other Side of Hurt podcast. And we have our friends, Melanie and Ron with us, but Melanie's the one going to be sharing the story. And I feel like Ron and Melanie have been friends with Jill and I for, 13 years, I would say. We got to know you probably 12, 13 years ago. And I have this theory that you always want friends in your life that are a little bit crazier than you are. So that's one of the reasons we're friends is because one of the things we said, we just had our seventh child. So Josiah was born in September. He's our seventh baby. And in our culture, people are like, well, how many children do you have? I'm like, well, we've had 7 children, but that feels normal because Melanie and Ron have 9 children. So you just always want somebody a little bit crazier. And I'm like the most awkward person in the world because I will say we've had 7, but one of our children died because I'm like a terribly awkward person. So just like in Walmart, people are like, wow, that's a really weird thing to say. And I'll say things like, we only have 6, which is weird, really weird in our culture because it feels like we only have, we're missing one. And so we have 6, but you guys have 9 children. And so that's why we're friends with you is because we always want weirder friends than ourselves.
We definitely qualify. And we only have 6 at home now.
Only 6 at home.
So when we travel, we're like, oh, there's just 8 of us.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Everybody thinks that's weird. And I'm like, well, it's a lot easier than traveling with 11. So.
And it's funny how that happens. Mm-hmm. How we had friends when we lived in Michigan. Their name is the Schraben family. So shout out to the Schrabens. They had 7 children and we would go to their house and we had just had one baby at the time. We would go over and we loved them. But after an hour and a half, we were just exhausted and all the little kids would be like, hey, Pastor Tristan. They were just going on and on and on. And I would just be like, oh my goodness, I need to go home. And I think last year, Jill and I were like, we've become the Schrabens. I don't know how that happened, just slowly over time. So you don't know when you're becoming weird. It just happens gradually, drip. Anyway, sorry. Right. There's the introduction.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have to offer to this.
I think calling me crazy is a really fair start. I think that's good.
My question when you have that many children is what sort of a vehicle do you drive?
We had the big ugly white 12-passenger van for a while.
You did.
And when we sold it, I was pretty excited about it, but then bittersweet like everything,
Yeah.
But yeah, now I just have a normal little Nissan. And for the first time, we just went to Florida and rented a minivan. Yeah. And I haven't driven a minivan in years. And so we flew.
This feels so small.
Because there was only 9 of us going.
So you talk about the big yellow or the big ugly 15-passenger van or whatever, but I'm kind of in the stage of man, if we end up with another kid, I know. I kind of aspire to that a little bit.
I was as excited to get into it as I was to get out of it. Because at some point you actually need to have the people and the groceries in the car at the same time. And that big van was the only option. So.
Convenience starts
it was
to
wonderful.
Become such a priority.
And you can bring all the stuff and go to the park and you've got jackets for everybody and snacks. So you can't do that in my little car. So.
All right, enough happiness. Let's get into the suffering part.
No more laughing.
No, Melanie, you're one of the. I told you this before. You're one of the most encouraging people I know, and it's fun to have you on. You're a joyful person. But the reason we want to have you on is to share the challenges that you went through, and it's been quite a few years. And Jill and I know a little bit, but we don't actually know a ton of what you went through. So why don't you just give us maybe a quick overview, and then we'll talk more detail. So
23 almost years ago, I had cancer and had my leg amputated. So that's the short.
The very short version. Hey, it was great having you on. Thanks for sharing.
We learned, I'm already on a rabbit trail. We learned in grief training that they say it takes 35 times of telling your story for it to start to get neater. And so at first I'll be like, blah, here's a 7-hour mess. And then the more you talk about it, you start to kind of wrap it up mentally as you say it. And so it's been 23 years.
23 years.
I have a 1-sentence version.
Sure.
Of it
Yeah.
Because there's been the long, messy stories. So that's the 23 years down
So 23 years, you guys were pretty early on in your marriage. Yeah. You didn't have 9 children yet?
Not yet. We only were planning on having 3 at that point. Because we didn't set out to be weird. That was never the goal. This was one obedient step at a time that got us weird.
Yeah.
So let's see. I was 26 and we've been married, how long? 6 years at that point.
Okay.
And the oldest of our kids was 3. Barely.
Oh my goodness.
And then the youngest was 1.5. They were 20 months apart. So
you had 3.
We just had 2 kids.
Oh, you had 2.
So we just had a 3 and a 1.5-year-old at that point.
Okay.
So then the longer version, then my one sentence.
Yeah. So what happened? How did you?
So way back, I had an injury like in 1998. I was a cross-country skier. So there isn't just conclusive research that says that repeated injuries would lead to this kind of cancer, but you always wonder if there's a connection. So way back, I had ankle pain. So then in about 2000, because Hannah was a baby, maybe late 1999, the pain just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And I'd go to the doctor and they'd say, "Did you hurt yourself?" And I would say no, because I hadn't. There was no injury because my ankle was so bad. I couldn't even walk in the grass. I had to walk on the sidewalk or I'd roll my ankle. So I babied it all the time. And I was used to pain. I ignored a fair amount of pain. And so we got bad enough that, nothing would control that pain. And so we thought that maybe it was hormones. I thought that it was the weather. I thought that it was activity. We had all these guesses, but nothing made sense. And so I went to an arthritis specialist. I got all these referrals, and they started saying that it was in my head. So they were getting ready for a psych appointment. But in hindsight, the stupid thing is we never did an x-ray because
Really?
we never said, yeah, I hurt myself. They were like, oh, there was no injury, so it's not broken or sprained. So let's look at all these other weird things. So in hindsight, that was dumb, but hindsight's always clear. So then at some point, I remember writhing in pain and Ron coming in and saying, watching your wife suffer and not be able to fix it. It's awful. And so him saying, "What can I do for you?" And I was like, "Go into the garage, get the chainsaw, cut my leg off." And still not joking. I don't know that would be a bloody mess and not the best way to take care of it. But I was like, I do not care what you have to do. I cannot do this pain anymore. So we decided to go in again to the doctor, even though we'd failed many times, and just basically be the people who threw a tantrum and I'm not done until we're done. So we got a referral, ended up without too much of a tantrum, got an orthopedic surgeon referral. And so we did an MRI. And then we went back to the waiting room to sit to see if he could find anything. And he came back to get us. He was this gentle retired surgeon he was getting old enough that he was kind of shaky, so he didn't do surgery anymore. So he was just in the office in the clinic. And so he came in very gently and called us back. But then as we go around the corner, there's a hallway and the little light screen deal with my picture on it. And all the doctors and all the people in the office are gathered around and going, and it was super weird. And then they turned and saw me and he's like, I don't know what he did because we were behind him, but gestured this is her thing. And they all just scattered like cockroaches. And we were like, oh my God, what is wrong with
That's not a good sign.
Not good. And so what happened, so your foot and your leg, the ankle bone's in the middle, it's not that big. But the tumor on the inside of the ankle bone had grown enough over time, and it would grow and then my body would beat it, and it would grow and my body would beat it. But that little teeny shell of bone that was left around it would fracture. And so my foot was breaking for no reason. So the pain was having a broken foot. And sometimes it probably was the weather, and sometimes it probably was hormones, but it was more my immune system, whether or not I was beating the cancer at the time or not. But I couldn't walk much without basically breaking it again. So the surgery then, the first time, they cleaned it out, packed it with bone cement with antibiotics, put me back together. And that was just kind of maybe going to be the end of it. But the tissue was dead at that point. My body was beating it. And so the best diagnosis they could come up with was kind of just a guess. They sent it to 3 different labs. Mayo, we were living in Indiana at the time. They said it was this giant cell tumor, which is not cancerous, was not going to kill you, is not going to spread, but is really aggressive as far as growing. And so they said, anticipate your leg being fused at some point so you don't have any mobility.
Okay.
Because we can probably do this once more, but if it comes back a second time, so that would be the 3rd total, you'll lose that. We'll have to take that bone out and you'll lose the mobility in your foot. So we were like, okay, it is what it is. That would be really bad, but whatever. So then,
how long had you been dealing with the pain until they found the cancer? Was it
I think the pain, looking back, it started the worst when I was pregnant with Rachel. So that would have been 97. So I'm guessing it was 2 to 3 years of just being miserable. So we went forward thinking we're probably on our way to better days.
Sure.
Could be over. Relieved that it wasn't cancerous at that point. So then we moved home from Indiana. That's another whole I don't know, maybe we'll get into that. But we had just moved like 750 miles from our friends, cashed in our tiny little life insurance, our retirement, cashed in all of our home equity, started a new high risk business. Like all this stuff was happening. We were living in a camper, and
you guys are crazy for multiple. We only touched on the crazy thing with the kids, but like entrepreneurial, starting businesses. No, it's
exactly.
It's good.
Well, so actually, we had 3 miscarriages that summer, and the late ones I wouldn't have known about, except they're doing all the tests to make sure that your hormones are normal or whatever. And so, everything happened. And then 6 weeks in, after we opened, our business partners quit. And it was like, are you kidding me? So then in the middle of that, the pain started back. And so we went down for a checkup, and I was thinking anyway, they're going to do the same surgery. They're going to clean it out. This is my last chance. Next time they fuse it, we're done. So that time, though, the cancer was growing. And so then they could get a good biopsy from it. Synovial sarcoma was the diagnosis. You probably never heard of it, might never again. The chances of getting it are like 1 in a million, super rare.
Sure.
At the time, there was no Google, which I'm really glad about. So they all said, attitude's everything. Just fight. You're good. And so we're like, okay, we're good. So in hindsight, my chances of surviving were like nothing.
Really?
Pretty much zero.
So it's really aggressive
maybe
cancer?
a 5% chance of surviving at that
Wow.
point. And I kind of didn't know that until a lot later, except that there were a few people that I had heard who got it. I'm from Grand Rapids, so somebody in Hibbing, like one famous actor that my dad kind of had a connection with, they all died like kind of fast. And I was like, geez, I didn't, whatever, but we didn't think about it. And at the time you're just surviving. I didn't worry about it really much. But in hindsight, once we could learn a little bit more about it, and just a couple of summers ago, I was standing in line at Reed's and Walker, a sporting goods store here in northern Minnesota. And a guy in front of me was like chatting a little, and finally he's like, do you mind if I ask about your leg? And I'm like, no, I don't care, ask. He turned out to be a retired prosthetist. And so he wanted to look at my leg and check out stuff. But he said, what kind of cancer did you have? And I told him, and he just went like, and he said, so your chances of surviving were like 0.
Really?
And I was like, yeah, that's what I hear. But this is 20 years later, and it still kind of messed with me, being like, oh, gosh, it was that bad. Like at the time, we didn't really know. We were just like, whatever. So the recommended treatment was amputation. They told us it was aggressive, but I don't remember knowing it was that aggressive. But, you're not going to mess with it. You want to keep your leg and die, or do you want to get rid of it, So we're like, yeah, sure. Do it. We just, I don't know. Now we question medicine a little more, but then we kind of just did what our doctors told us to do anyway. And our surgeon did say, get a second opinion if you want to or whatever. But so the timeline's a little weird because, I had that surgery thinking this was just a repack deal. Then we went to my mom and dad's house to recover, and they could help with the kids and whatever. And that was a little fuzzy to me, but it was like 10 days before I went back for the amputation surgery, to get that scheduled and everything. So,
you guys had some how many kids at the time?
Just 2.
Okay, still
3
just
and the 1.5-year-old.
Okay.
But 10 days between the initial thinking that you weren't going to have your leg amputated, and then 10 days later you had your leg amputated?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So the phone call with the diagnosis and here's the plan and all that was pretty fast. But in a way, good, right?
Yeah.
How long do you want to think about that? It's weird. I remember, so here's TMI in a podcast. I remember going in and being like, so, like, should I shave my leg? Like, they're going to, we donated it to science. Like, it's bobbing around in a jar somewhere. I'm like, should I paint my toenails? Like, is that really it's going to be in this, like, some lab somewhere? And I'm like, does anybody care? I don't care. Should I shave both legs? What am I doing? But, I know, weird.
I appreciate that because it's like that
I only had 10 days because it was weird.
Those are the things you think about. And I would have never
super weird
questioned. Yeah.
I don't know. Like, there's something about like that brings it more to home of like, how do you make sense of these things?
Bye, leg. Like,
you've never thought about it. Yeah. Oh, goodness.
And my aunt had just had breast cancer not too long before that. And I remember a conversation with her where she said, we let ourselves grieve and cry and feel sorry for ourselves and throw a little tantrum. And then at some point they were like, all right, now I'm going to live. I'm not going to let this take more from me than it has to. I'm not going to be like, you took my leg, but now here's everything else. So, you know, like time's up. And so, grief doesn't work like that. It cycles back and slaps you in the face over and over and over again. But the time to like wallow in it, 10 days was good. That was enough. But I want more. I don't want to think about this longer. And you can't really move on anticipating that kind of thing. So, so surgery went well. The pain was horrible afterwards. Like I had forgotten. See, here's where I start crying. It's been years. And so knowing this was coming, I got my journal out. And I don't just, when I remember pain, I remember phantom pain and just like, gosh, what is my deal? I mean, I would just like rub it all day long. Like if I was awake and I couldn't sleep. And the best thing they could do for phantom pain, and I don't think it's gotten a whole lot better, was Neurontin. But the side effects are depression. I couldn't handle lights and sounds, and I had a 1 and a 3-year-old. And then after the amputation, we went to Ron's mom and dad's because it would just work better, you know, knowing it was a little more long term. They were home and could help a little bit more, and his brothers were home. But I mean, it was a circus, you know, our family sharing a bedroom, and there's dogs and cats and little kids, and I can't handle everything makes me crabby, and I can't handle noise, and I've got a 3 and a 1.5-year-old, and so I'm like, I can't even stand my own kids, and I, you know, whatever. So then I tried to go off that bed thinking I can't be this person, you know, and started going off the meds, and that didn't work either. It was a lot worse than I thought. So anyway, just like going back and reading the journal, it was almost like it wasn't even me. And then I was like, oh yeah, I remember, you know. So, the weird thing is I never think about this. I mean, I never feel this. It's so weird because it's been like time does heal. Time does help a lot of things. And it's been so much time that I'm like, God, I forgot how bad it was. And then I think about Ron and I think about the kids and.
Yeah. What was.
You know, for him to be like, you know, and he's not selfish. So I'm sure he's thinking about my comfort and well-being. But, you know, I'm thinking like, how are you going to do this without me? But okay, so this is weird. I guess we've always been weird. When I woke up from that second surgery, I just had total peace. And we found out later that I had 17 prayer chains that we counted, that we heard about praying for me. And, you know, I mean, Philippians says, pray, give God your requests, and he'll give you peace that passes understanding. And I feel like to the best of our ability in the middle of it, we were trusting God, and it may not be the outcome we wanted, but he was going to be good. And if I ended up out of the picture and Ron's raising, like it would, whatever, God would be good somehow, somewhere. And I woke up from the surgery totally just at peace, 100%. And, so Ron came in, and you know, when you're coming out of anesthesia in the fog, like, I don't know the actual timeline. But he came in, it felt like soon, right away after I woke up. I don't know. And he said, how are you doing? And I said, I'm actually like weirdly good. I'm weirdly peaceful. And he's like, oh, good. Cause I'm happy. I'm fine. And I thought you were gonna be mad at me for like not being more upset about your leg or whatever. But we had this like weird, just like assurance of, you know, we had people praying for healing. And we were like, I think that was it. I think that was my healing. I think we're done. And the chances of it, you know, going into my, like being in my bloodstream and going into my lungs was still super, super high. And so even though my leg was gone, you know, once it's in your lungs, you're done. You don't have a chance, you know, pretty much. So even though like scientifically that was still a reality, we just did not feel like it was. And so from the amputation surgery forward, it really felt like it was over. So we did my follow-up chest x-ray kind of checkups for a while. They initially said 5 years. They let us quit at 3, and we kind of drug out the time between them just because we're like, we're wasting our time. I'm fine. And that wasn't wasn't a flippant, dumb thing. We just had that level of confidence that it was over, which doesn't make a lot of sense considering the statistics, but it felt like a miraculous healing. And I think my friends who wanted me to not lose my leg were disappointed, but I was like, I don't care. I wanted to get rid of my leg 5 years ago. It hurt. I mean, it's been so much pain for so long that, you know, not that much of a loss. And in hindsight now, a prosthesis in 2 decades has not cumulatively hurt as much as 1 day of pain that I had, leading up to it. And so I'm like, no big loss there. My new leg works better than my old one did. And then even the blessing of, if my leg had been fused, that would have been way more debilitating as far as a handicap in the prosthetics. I would have definitely had a limp and definitely not been able to do some things with that. And so I'm like, this is like the best outcome that I can imagine. So the leg doesn't bother me. I mean, every now and then I get annoyed with it, but so I don't know.
Yeah. What was life like transitioning to, when did you get your prosthetic?
I just saw my timeline again. It felt like forever. So the amputation was like July 31st, and my first practice leg, where it's just basically like a pirate peg leg, like nothing fancy, but you just kind of have to start getting used to it. That was early October. So basically, a little more than 2 months with nothing, wheelchair. And then, that practice leg, I think my goal was to have my new leg by Christmas. And so, but the residual limb, they call it, normal people would say stump, it shrinks, like atrophies for a long time, the changing and the shape and the size. So they don't give you like a good one until you're kind of done with the majority of that, just that physical change. So Christmas from the end of July was when I got the first cool one, the first, robot they gave me because I had little kids. They called me, I'm not athletic at all. I've never been athletic, but they gave me like the most athletic leg that you can get because I'm chasing little kids around.
And that was my thought process. Like when I could relate to where you have kids at home and you have a husband and what was that like? I mean, learning to navigate life without a leg and
there was so much other stuff going on. I mean, I just figured out how to hold a laundry basket in my wheelchair on my lap. Like when you've got a 3 and a 1-year-old that are hungry, you just have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so slow. I mean, everything was slow, but in the meantime, our business partners quit. So he's running a business that has 24-hour turnaround. We put a bed in his office 17 miles from our, all that stuff. And then we'd been living in a camper, and then my parents and his parents, we didn't have a house. And so we didn't have any money. So we bought this terrible old double wide. Well, he's trying to get this double wide moved an hour and a half, put a deck on it, run a business, take care of the kids, get me to doctor's appointments constantly, prosthetist appointments. I don't really think. So the adjustment to my leg was like just another appointment, whatever. You know what I mean?
I will never complain about anything the rest of my life ever again.
We have spent the rest of our lives going, well, it's not 2001. I mean,
I'm sure.
One rough year since, but we're like, we can do it. We can do it. Kid-wise, I think what was the hardest was the mom part. We talked about this a little bit before. Like, I'm fine, but how about my babies? And I want my husband to be okay, but I know he'll be okay.
Yeah.
What about my babies? And so I did journal. Here I go again. I wrote down the first time I could pick Hannah up again. And I had forgotten about that. And she was, a little peanut of a kid. And so, I'm the like mom who holds the babies all the time. I never put them down. And I couldn't pick her up. I couldn't carry her. And she was big enough. She could walk. But I once I read that, I remembered at some point like her stubbing her toe or something, and she went to like her uncle for a Band-Aid, and then she'd go to grandma for a snack. And I hated that she was going to somebody else to meet her needs. So once I got my leg, the coolest thing about it probably for a long time was I could pick up my kid again. And of course, clunk, 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 clunk across the kitchen floor, but we can do it. And so I did have to have physical therapy to learn how to walk, learn how to do steps. My kids just got into soccer. We've never played soccer, 26 years, never played soccer. And Malachi told me to kick the ball to him last summer, and I nailed it. And he was like, "Oh my goodness, it's not athletic, mom." But
it's with your athletic.
It's my prosthetic. But I tend to favor my strong leg and kind of avoid. But so that's one thing that my physical therapist made me do was I had to step onto my right leg to kick with my left and go back and forth just for that control. And apparently it's like riding a bike. I hadn't kicked a soccer ball in 20 years, but, so I don't remember if it was a ton of therapy. It's so fuzzy. In the middle of it all, then September 11th happened. This isn't funny. This is funny.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if this is funny. We're in the middle of it. I don't have a leg. We're living at my in-laws. We're in like the worst of it. Ron's trying to get a house moved. I mean, it's crazy. Twin Towers collapse. And we were like, all right. Like, how maybe you've been there. You're just full. Like, I cannot feel another thing. I cannot handle another thing. basically unfazed by the biggest tragedy in our lifetime nationwide,
Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
like, I don't have time to do my stuff in that. And so it was, we were like maxed out. But then God gave us grace. I mean, here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are. So.
Wow. All right. So for brevity, one of my favorite things is tell us about, like, because we knew you for, I knew you for, like, I don't know, 6 months before I even knew that any of this had happened. And so, like, share, like, the fun that I told you, like, you got to share this because it's like,
no, I definitely would have.
I love this.
That happens every spring. So I don't care. Like, I'm not a beauty queen and I just don't care. So I all summer wear capris and dresses. I never try to cover up my prosthetic. Like, doesn't bother me. So then in the winter it's cold in Minnesota. So I wear long pants. So every spring I always know who, like, my new friends are that I've made over the winter. New people who've moved to town or whatever, because every spring I have a handful of people go, wait, what?
Like, yeah.
I didn't know. What in the world?
It's like you're like really getting close for 6 months and you're like, wait.
Right.
You're missing a leg? Like, I didn't know that. Like, how did I not know this for 6 months of knowing you?
And I love that, actually, because it shows me, like, you can get close to somebody in 6 months. Like, people will come to church and I'm like, we're good friends. And then they don't know. Oh.
Well, Jill
I just met you since last summer.
Yeah, man. It was like I think we met in the fall. You guys were you started coming to Riverview some, and I was playing basketball with Ron, and Jill started working for you guys some. And so, like, we're building a friendship.
Pretty overlapping.
Yeah, overlapping in a lot of ways. Then it's like, May, and I'm like, wait, what? Like, I don't know. Right. But like, it does say something about, like, how God brings, like, healing and how you've lived a normal life, as normal as a weirdo as you are, but fairly normal. But it's pretty cool. Like, because for us, like, so even just in hearing all this, saw the, like, the first time for me and so many of the details, and yet we've been friends for years, and so it's like it's cool to see how God's restored and brought so much health.
And I'm, we're so forgetful. Like God always says in the Old Testament, tell your kids, tell your grandkids, don't forget. And they had to build these little monuments. And I know it's weird. And sometimes I'm like, do I really mean that? But that's one of the reasons I'm grateful for the prosthesis, really, is it's like one of those little pile of rocks in the desert. Because, God's done amazing things in our lives that we totally just forget about and take for granted. And this is such a miracle, really, all of it, that I know I'm kind of dumb. And there's a lot of it I had forgotten. Like, I go back and look at my journal and I'm like, oh man, I forgot it was that bad. Like, I'm actually grateful for the tangible reminder to be grateful. And I can say, I only know one other person that survived this cancer, and that was like a miraculous healing. The only two of us who I know of that are alive with this both feel like it was a miraculous healing. That's my chances. If it wasn't for God, I wouldn't be here. And so I could still forget. I mean, it's so easy. And so I'm like, this is my little altar in the desert kind of thing, So I like when people ask, because I'm like, oh yes, I get to remember again for a second that God miraculously has given me this abundant life, And
isn't it true too? Like, it's almost good to go back and be like, remember where you were, because you think that, I'm sure in that season, it's like, this is our life. This is it. Like this, you almost died. You lost your leg. You're dealing with little children. I mean, this is all very heavy stuff. But 10 years later, you're dealing with other stresses and you're like, oh, how are we going to get through this? Right. And it is like good to look back, because you do see like grace and providence through things that are a lot harder than you're going through now. But in the moment, I mean, even going through grief and loss, you feel like the rest of my life will be just sad. And then eventually you get healthy again. And now I'm just stressed about some other stupid thing right now. I'm like, how am I going to overcome this? And it's like,
you've done it.
It's okay. He got us through much worse things. Like there's a grace to that, I think.
Absolutely. Perspective. Yeah.
Because I would have never known, like, knowing you guys as well as we do. Even now I'm kind of like, I'm not even sure what to say about this, because the depth of this is far more than even I realized, and yet my framework for understanding you guys is like deep, compassionate friends who, like, we just care about deeply. And as much as I pick on you for being a little bit crazier than us, like, we love you guys, and you guys have been really such joyful friends. And like, wow, there's this whole thing that we just barely scratched the surface of. I had no idea, like, the the depth of the cancer, like, or how rare, how difficult it is to overcome. Like I didn't know that until like right now. Right. So yeah. Wow. So crazy. Yeah.
So like on one hand, you don't know it, but I feel like it's so much of like the leg's not part of who I am. Like that's not a big deal, right. But so much of like who I am comes from that. Yeah. And so then, people ask even kind of right away, well, I wouldn't do it again, but I wouldn't go back and change it. People say that, and I 100% feel like that.
What were you like before this happened?
About the same. I actually wondered because we had a pretty significant, like, spiritual, like, we'd been Christians, following God, trusting God, like, trying to hear his voice, trying to obey. It's how we got there in the first place. But we had a pretty significant spiritual growth season after the cancer. And so I couldn't exactly remember where I was at spiritually during it, And so I found my journal, and I'm sure I'll cry again. I was like, this was awful, describing all the terrible stuff that made me cry before. And then I was like, okay, God, I need you to give me a new heart, give me a new mind, give me a new mouth. So I'm going to start right now with my new mouth, and I'm going to praise you. And so I'm just listing all the stuff I'm grateful for. Grateful for Ron's 13, however old the little brother was, pulling Hannah around in a cardboard box all over the living room, and grateful for my mother-in-law cooking, and grateful that with just one step in my crutches, I could get to the washer and dryer. And I was like, wow, good job, Melanie. Like if it was somebody else and I read it, I'd been like, good job. Yeah. But I don't remember, I don't remember how much I consciously had to choose gratitude. And I don't, I forgot. But I was like, oh, I had some depth then. I feel like I was still me in a way, but it was very much refined. I heard a sermon a couple years ago, and the guy lost his wife, and he said, the appropriate response in every situation is worship. And I thought, no, like that. And he was reading from Job, who gets all this bad news, tears his clothes and falls down to the ground in worship. And I was like, I'm not there. Definitely not there. And so then I was looking in Job just like this morning, literally, because that still bugs me. Like that still kind of rubs me wrong. And Job didn't go, yay, I'm dancing in the streets with tambourine. But he basically just was like, God, I came into this world with nothing. I'm going to leave with nothing. Yeah. You give and you take away. Mm-hmm. And basically like that surrender of like, you don't owe me anything. And so I was like, that's what I was doing. Like, so the whole time I've had a bad attitude about this sermon line for a few years. And then I looked at my journal a couple of days ago, and I was like, oh, all right. God, you gave me life. I don't deserve more. And people would say, you don't deserve this. You're young and 25 and whatever. And it rubbed me the wrong way. And it took me a while in the cancer journey to realize why. But I thought, oh, really? As a Christian, the wages of sin is death. I don't deserve life at all. I don't deserve to live past 26 years old. I don't deserve to finish raising my kids. I don't deserve, I don't deserve to be able to pick Hannah up and go get ice cream. And you know what I mean? So in a way, like every breath that we breathe and everything that we do, it's absolutely a gift through God's grace. And so it's the like not entitlement thing, whatever that is I'm going to fall down to the ground and be like, God, you're good. I don't get this and I hate it, but I know who you are. Mm-hmm. And I know that you're good. And I know that there's good all around me, even if it's hard to see it. And I know I don't deserve more good. And I'm super grateful for the good that you have put in my life. And I'm going to take what you give me and I'm going to accept it, So I don't know.
But hearing that, given the context, is I think more powerful. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think like, if you don't have some recognition of this is really hard, or even you said something earlier, cause you talked like just as a mother when we were chatting ahead of time of like, you're like, that's our goal is to make you cry.
I'm fine. The kids now ball every
Well, that's it. But like that to me, like brings context to where it's like, it's not just about you as a 26-year-old, like, which we would all, I think, knowing you, if I knew you then, I'd be like, this doesn't seem right, or I'm really sad for my parents. And like as a mom, as a wife, like that's a lot to bear. Because you were saying something about at one point you're like getting ready to have your leg amputated, and the same time you're trying to teach Rachel. Tell us, come on, you got to tell us that.
Right. So my oldest child is very capable, very strong, very smart, loves to be the firstborn. She's good at it. But at 3, this wasn't the goal, but knowing I could die, I'm like, okay, we got to get you tying your shoes kind of, she read young, she tied her shoes young. And I was like, what can she cook that she can make for herself and her little sister in case I die? Like, how can I make this easier for Ron to raise little kids? And so, you're going to get little Velcro shoes and you're going to learn how to tie your shoes. And I'm going to make sure. And I even I bought clothes ahead a little bit, thrift shopping, because I'm like, if I die, I don't want him 6 months from now to be like, they don't have a single dress to wear to their mom's wedding and I can't handle this right now, or their mom's funeral and I can't handle this right now.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
But so I mentioned this when we were talking about that though. It's so messy, like pain and grief and suffering. That's why you're doing this podcast. It's so complicated because I'm not lying saying we had 100% assurance that it was over. But I'm also going to make sure that Rachel can cook for Hannah. Like what, that isn't,
Yeah.
Because both are a reality. Like there's like hope, there's joy, but there's also like, there's no guarantees that like, you're going to get what you want.
Right. And I know I'm not entitled to it. God doesn't give me that.
Right.
So
no, that's,
it's crazy. Crazy. So I have this weird, so we've talked about you having babies, having a big family. And I think people are like, oh, how can you bring kids into this world? And I feel like that's an act of like defiant hope.
Absolutely.
And I think that, about me that I have this weird optimistic attitude. That I have this weird defiant hope, but maybe not so much where it got refined. So then I'm super weird about like doing the things that don't make any sense. And my sweet husband has always supported it. But one of the things, like I cannot hardly carry Hannah yet. But our dream, get in the country. We'd always lived in town. We're going to have little goats and chickens and whatever. And so I definitely cry every time I talk about this. Good grief. So we're going to get goats. Like, this is the stupidest thing that you could possibly do in this season is getting goats.
Absolutely.
The dumbest thing. Especially babies that need to be bottle fed. Like, that's the worst possible idea. But it's kind of like, can I say this? Giving Satan the middle finger. You know what? I'm going to live.
Yeah,
and so you took this, but you're not taking this, and you're not taking this, and you're not taking this. And if you are, I'm going to get everything I can out of it until I go, Wow. And so I want to goats.
So you're in your double wide.
So I'm in my double wide. Yeah. So there was a little barn thing on the property that we had bought. Terrible. I mean, not ready for goats. You don't get prepared to get goats. You just get them and deal with it. And so Ron was on board, and it was just one of those like weird, stubborn, like I can't even explain it. And I knew. Like, there's just people who, there's things people say and you're like, I don't really help me. And then there's things that people do and you're like, that's exactly what I needed. So one day my father-in-law had been in a livestock auction and shows up in our yard with a trailer with 4 goats in it. And he had the bottles and the milk for, like, he bought the little powdered milk and stuff and a little bit of feed for us. And he just shows up with goats. I was like, what the heck are we going to do with goats? But it was exactly what I wanted and exactly what I needed. And it was life, and so then it was fall. It's going to be icy. So now we're clomping down to the barn on my little peg leg with a baby and, carrying bottles and whatever. Like the stupidest thing that we could have done. But like sometimes you just have to fight. You can't just be sad all the time. I can't just live in my head. Like I have to expand my world a little bit bigger than the grief and the pain and the fear and the, preparing my kids for my funeral. Like you can't just... I can't do that.
Some people were bringing you meals and some people were bringing you goats. And it's just,
yep.
Which one you preferred?
This is the moment. This is the moment in the podcast where I want Ron to have a microphone and no. I feel like he would have something very profound to say about the goats.
It was my father-in-law.
Yeah,
so it was your dad that brought the goats.
Yeah.
So you were good. I mean, you must have approved it, or you wouldn't have shown up with the goats. But so I still do that. There are still things like I was 5 months pregnant with Malachi. We went to Hawaii, and I had been there in high school, and I was too stupid going to the Hard Rock Cafe. Like I didn't do the tourist things that I should have. So then when we went back, I said, I wish I'd climbed Diamond Head Crater. I want to climb this mountain. And Ron was like, okay, I'll help you. And so in a dress, 5 months pregnant on a prosthetic leg, I'm like, well, I'm going to climb this mountain. And he 100%, 20, however many years, 23 years, he's never been like, really, honey, I think you shouldn't. And I mean, I think there's enough wisdom in it. I don't think I do something actually stupid. But I mean, he's literally like helped me get to the top of mountains, literally helped me do like any crazy thing. And I loved cross country skiing, and the equipment just wouldn't work with my leg. And a few years ago, like the technology's changed and the boots are different, and I can get skis. And so the fact that I just went, no, we just got snow, I just skied. It's so cool that I can. I don't care if I ski, but I care that I can ski.
Oh, wow.
And so if we pay $300 for equipment that hangs in the garage forever, he's not gonna be mad because he knows that it bothers me that I can't ski. And that's a bigger deal to me than skiing. So he's always humoring me with things like that, I have to,
you guys are a good team. You guys are a good team. And like, this is like your journey together, right? Like,
absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
And yeah, that's fun to hear. And so like when you went to Hawaii, that must've been at least a couple of years afterwards, right? Because you had Sarah. Did you have Sarah after your amputation?
After another act of defiant hope, having a baby. Actually, when I was in the hospital.
No, you had 7 babies after, right?
But the first one was a scary one.
But Sarah was the first.
I had to do physical therapy to be like, can I carry a baby? And in the hospital before I left. Sorry, what was the question?
No, that must have been like the Kilimanjaro, not Kilimanjaro. That's in Africa.
That next time. Right. So Malachi was born in 2006. So this would have been kind of the February before that. So 5 years in.
Yeah. Okay.
5 years. So, I mean, I was doing fine on my leg. And when I'm paying attention and I try and I keep it adjusted like I should, I don't even walk with a limp.
Yeah.
But I'm probably usually 3 years overdue for a prosthetist appointment to adjust it. So, I mean, if I walk with a limp, it's because I overdid it or, because I'm a mom who takes care of themselves. There's other stuff to do. So I have time for that. But no, it's good.
Good. I guess, man, anything else you're learning through this? Anything else just in your journey with you and Ron in all of this that you're taking away? Or even maybe just like, since we asked you to be on the podcast, you've been forced to go back and like...
Yeah, it's been interesting. I haven't cried about it in a long time, and I'm making up for it.
It's our goal. Our goal is to make people cry.
That's, you'll cry and laugh. So here we do, smashing success.
I wasn't worried about this one. I knew we'd have plenty of laughter and plenty of tears.
Time does heal. Like there's things you could ask me about that are way closer, and they're not so funny.
Right.
I mean, the stuff we've gone through since, and we had another year that had a lot of hard times in it, and we're like, oof, this one's pretty close to 2001. And it was more emotional stuff, and it's more like not resolved stuff that, it's just not, it's not as funny. It's not as, and I mean, losing a leg compared to what I could have lost and probably should have lost. I mean, it's really not a big deal. When people ask me about it, they're kind of nervous, like, does she want to talk about this? I'm like, I do not care. It just does not. There's no part of it. Maybe if I was more of a beauty fashion person or something, that would matter. But no, I don't know. Do we have time? I mean, there's one more lesson that I've been pondering about.
Absolutely, Edit
it out if you want. Recently, I was reading in Jonah, and you read it over and over and over again. But the word that hit me in the NIV was God provided a whale. And like the Sunday school version of the story was the whale was the punishment. Like, this is your icky timeout because you were bad. And I was like, provided? What do you mean provided? And so I looked it up and, looked in all the different translations because in your Bible app, it's easy to jump. And there was like 7 different ways that was translated. And it was appointed and predestined and all kinds of like really intentional words. And I was like, that's weird. So then I started Googling it, and to go the 2,500 miles to Nineveh, all that, there's only like 1 or 2 kinds of fish. They were big enough to hold a guy and could go that fast and get him, And so then if you read Jonah's own later, like his prayers and praise are, you pulled me up out of the depths and you put my feet on solid ground. And I was like, oh, the whale's actually the provision. It wasn't the curse. It was the blessing. And so that's for 25 years, even with this, I never want to look at like the creator of the universe and a blessing he's given me and just foolishly call it a curse. I don't know what God's doing. And I feel like a lot of things I feel like are a curse, and then time goes by and I'm like, oh, I see what you were doing there. I see what you were doing there. And so I don't know. I feel like it's kind of relevant. Like that's just been the thing I've been pondering lately. I just keep reading Jonah and Jonah and Jonah, but like even in the hard stuff, I don't know what God's doing. I
think that's a truth. And we talked about, Tristan and I did a podcast, I don't think it's released yet, just about how our faith has changed.
Oh, yeah.
And like trusting God in the midst of hardship and knowing that, I think before our suffering with our son, it was hard to imagine that God could have his hand in anything hard. Like, and that was a really big truth. Because without that, things are just meaningless and purposeless and like what,
and just hard.
Yeah. But I did a lot of listening to Elizabeth Elliot, and I loved her example of how she's like, sometimes God's refining feels like just a fine tooth, like comb and just like, making small adjustments. And sometimes it just feels like an absolute hammer, just like chiseling you. And, yeah, that's a great example of Jonah. Like sometimes God's provision doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel easy.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks for sharing. This is
thanks.
We don't really know what we're doing here anyway,
good.
but
It's been an honor to be part of it.
Oh man, we love having you on, and it's fun to hear your story, and it's I don't know, it's just good to see where you're at, what God's doing in your family, and no, it's good. It's good. So thanks for being willing to come on.
I don't know you like Tristan knows you, and I just listening to you talk, and God is working in your life, and it's just cool to see how.
Thanks. We'll be friends now because I'm getting to know you watching podcasts.
Yeah. That's the fun part. That's good. That's the fun part.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of our podcast. Please share and like and subscribe to be a part of the Other Side of Hurt community. Also, if you are somebody who has recently suffered the loss of a child, or if you know of a family, we are going to link to our website, Smile Again Grief Ministries, below. And we would love to connect with you to see if there's anything we can do as we walk together in some of the most difficult things that families go through. God bless you.